Good evening, citizens, and welcome to another Shattersong LARP Diaries episode. Today, I am once again joined by the illustrious Amber. Say hello, Amber.
Hello, Amber.
Fantastic, the joke hasn't died. Today, we're going to be talking more about Empire, and as we mentioned on the last episode, we wanted to talk about the Military Council, or MC for short, and we're also going to loop it a little bit into some of the Winds of War that have come out. They're always fun to cover, but I thought with someone who's been in the MC tent, right? This is going to be a lot
Me.
more relevant and poignant for you, and to kind of get your reactions and thoughts on it. Sound good?
Exciting. Let's go.
Fantastic. All right then. So first, broad sweeping question, and with the usual disclaimer for these episodes, we are opinionated, not fully informed, non-official, probably not even correct, and we're just going to say what we believe to be true, not what is true. Just
I
that's to
mean, it
cover
works in the
us.
media these days, so
It
we
does, yeah.
are
You can
covered.
you can just say what you want, and if you just yell it loud enough, it becomes true. So that's what this is for. First, broad sweeping question then. Tell us about how you got involved with the military council tent. I think you mentioned it in the previous episode, but maybe just a quick recap, and then
Mhm.
what it's like in there, what actually happens, what's the I was going to say day to day, but you've only been in for one event. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. The day, a
The
literal day in
day,
the life of an adjutant to the Iron Helms.
no less. Yeah. So I think I touched on it in the last episode, but obviously it all started on Discord. If you're a new player, I really recommend getting on the Discord as soon as you can. I don't know where you can find it though, because I think someone added me. Um, but yeah, Older the Fair, their Fizz rep put out a little call out for people who were relatively new to the game who would like, to have a little taster session of military council while they were down an adjutant. So I put out, a little response. It was some sort of in character over the web exchange. And yeah, I ended up having to meet them on the Friday evening where they sort of spoke through how it was going to run and what, the sort of duties were of an adjutant. For those who are quite new to the game, an adjutant is basically like a general's second. If a general has some tasks to do, they usually give it to the adjutant. If they've got decisions they need help making, they give it to their adjutant. Um, what I wasn't prepared for was just the sheer amount of standing around in a very cold tent. So if you ever do sort of go to be an adjutant, I'd recommend bringing like something warm, because it got really chilly late at night. But yeah, that is how I got involved.
Fantastic. And on that point of actually standing in the tent, is it like some of the other hat roles, like senator, like cardinal, for example, or general? They're all like colloquially called hats. Is it like
Mhm.
other hats roles where there's like a lot of waiting around, a lot of process, or is it actually
So
quite
much.
fun?
I mean, it is still really fun, but it's long and it's you've got to wait for everyone to, say their piece, and there's a lot of generals. As adjutant as well, you're not very vocal there. You're more of there as like an observer, as a recorder. You help with little bits of admin. And then because basically if no one's been in the military council tent before, if you're quite new, there's a big table in the middle which has a map of the empire where different armies are, and then there's a row, like a ring of benches where your generals sit, and then the adjutants stand behind them, and then anyone who's come to observe stands behind them. So there's a lot of standing around unless your general leaves or they ask you to take the seat instead of them. That happened a couple of times, and that was amazing 'cause we got to sit down. Um, but you're kind of stood there watching, taking notes, reacting to how, people are talking to each other or what they're saying. I was really lucky to like Varushka is seated next to the orcs and then next to the Empress, so you're in between two really cool groups. And that was really nice just getting to talk to some of the orcs because I haven't really interacted with them in game. And then also just seeing the Empress in all her, like glory and her guard and things was really cool. And I don't think you get to do that much as a new player. So seeing like the power in the game was cool.
Yes, especially as a new player, well, a relatively new player yourself, right?
Mhm.
Is it a nice mix in the tent? Is it newer players? Is it older players? What kind of LARPer ends up as a general? from what you've seen so far?
Ooh, I mean, that's a good question because you can't, there's no sort of introduction to like, you're a new player, you're a new player, you're a new player kind of thing. It's very much the generals sit down, they, if the adjutant needs to speak, they introduce themselves as the general's adjutant. Apart from that, there's no really key qualifying indication of who's new, who's old, and it just, you can kind of tell who is a bit more of a seasoned LARPer versus who might just be there to watch. Um, like, but then some people's characters are quite quiet, so character who's quite quiet, it doesn't necessarily mean they're, a new LARPer. Like Alder the Fair is very stoic, very
Oh
sort of
gosh, yes,
much and yeah,
terrifying.
yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, terrifying. Lovely, lovely person, but their character is quite scary and they sort of sit and they observe and they only talk when they need to, and that gives them quite a lot of power and respect. So I didn't really have to do much talking, which was great because I didn't really know what was going on. But there's not a lot of chance if you are there as an adjutant to like uh actually, no, actually, whenever I had a question, I would just ask like the other adjutants, the other Varushkan adjutants, and they were in the same boat as me, where they were just taking notes or listening, so they had the time to go through um, things with me. And then on the last night, Alderay left the tent, and the I can't remember the name of the person who leads military council when the Empress isn't there, but they basically asked, what are Alderay's orders, and I had to read them out, and that was really like, ooh, and
Oh,
that
so
was like a
you
little
got to
bit of a
read out the
speech.
orders for the Iron Helms to
Yeah.
go into Tharunin.
Yeah, and for
Oh,
the cook and cold
damn.
meats, which was really cool. But like there was a part of it where you have to say like no, what have they actually ordered, and it was a balanced attack. So for me, I didn't know what that meant, and all of the generals were really quick to help me out. And I think it was probably quite obvious that I was a new player, but no one let that out in their role play or in the way they interacted with me. So that was really nice.
Oh, nice, fantastic.
Mhm.
Definitely that is a very cool claim to fame. Is you're the one that not maybe not technically because they're still Alderai's orders, but you were the trumpeter, the herald, if you will, of the doom of the
Herald
Iron
of Death.
Helms. The Herald of Death. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a cool title.
At the time, I wasn't so basically the like towards the end of military council. I mean, I've only been once, and I was learning in the process, so some of my recollections might be a bit sketchy. But towards the end of military council, they obviously asked the generals to write their orders, and it was sort of a big thing of whether they were going to enact. I think it's called like quick and cold meats is the main thing.
Yeah,
But it was like, are we going to enact it? And Alderete turned around to us and the adjutants and was like, well, what are we going to do? Like, as someone who doesn't know what it does, I was trying to figure out as much as I could in the moment of what are the consequences of using it. And in the end, obviously, we chose to um, add it into the orders that we were, using
mm,
it. And the sort of knock-on effect that that's had this season for people who've read the wins is enormous. So to have been part of that is really cool. But for my character, like Danica is someone who really wants to get involved in the military game, and it's part of her backstory. So having that experience for her was like, this is so cool. Um, and so it'll be really fun to play out the repercussions of like this like decision.
nice. Would you like a dramatic reading, a brief one of
I
what
would
quickening cold
love a
meat
dramatic
does?
reading. Yes, please.
All right, so quickening cold meat is a imperial ritual, magnitude 150, so it's a big boy, really big boy to cast. Takes 10 minutes, has to be done at the anvil, Regio, targets an imperial armory, army, and the general has to be present for it, and its effect is pretty cool. So this ritual raises a large number of undead husks to join a campaign army. The presence of these husks will raise the strength of the campaign army by 1,000, and as with any enchantment on an army or navy, the additional army strength granted by this enchantment may be reduced by the orders issued by the general. So you talked about balanced attack. There's like heroic stand, defensive, give ground, overwhelming assault. They all change how many casualties you take and how much damage you do to an opponent. So this interacts with that. While the effect is expressed as being equivalent to additional soldiers, this enchantment never reduces casualties suffered by the army. So that's why the zombies are still wandering around, even though the Iron Helms are dead. The ritual draws on creatures from the Winter Realm. These creatures have been known to exert unpredictable influence on those fighting alongside them, especially those with Draugr lineage. Effects might include lingering roleplay effects or temporary hero points for the captains of military units supporting the Enchanted Army. Such effects are unpredictable, and when they occur, they will be described in the Winds of War, which we will get onto, because I think you've not had an extra hero point this time, have you? You've had something entirely else.
Much worse. But just coming back to that is I kind of knew the extent of it when it was announced because of people's reactions and sort of people looking at each other. But the main thing for me is that it must have been a big move because it's a Varushkin who chose to do it. And as Varushkins, we're taught to be really wary and we're taught to, fear not fear the unknown, but to be apprehensive about it and to always have our guard up. So to actively welcome it, me going into a pursuit, it's like, okay, we need this. It's something that actually, like, we sort of have no other alternative. Um, but I'm new to these things, so it might be completely different. But for me, that's what it meant in the moment, and I was like, okay, then this is a big move we're making. Let's see how it goes, and it's gone dreadfully. Um, as we'll get onto now.
Yeah, let's talk about the politics. So that's a really cool insight into MC as a new player. Um, what's your opinions on the Wind of War and what's happened to the poor Iron Helms? For those of you who don't know, very long story short, you can read Under Eastern Skies on the Empire Wiki. But the to summarize it, and if you don't like spoilers, pause it now. I'll give you a moment just to fumble with your pause button. Five, four, three, two, one. Okay, cool. Yeah, not only a sailor's dance has been wiped out, but so have the Iron Helms, as the Druge have engaged in a merciless onslaught into Thorunin. I think they've killed
Oh, good.
12 and a half thousand Imperial troops. And as a result, I think the fluff of this Wind of War is that a sailor's dance literally fights to the last thorn, breaking through the encirclement of the Druge. And then when the Black Wind, which are a former Baron's Sept, more on them later, Jesus Christ, um, they hunted out the Iron Helms because the Iron Helms were the army that put down their tribe originally, I think last year, maybe the year before. And then they had a grudge match 1-on-1, and the Varushkins took it and did the same as the Sailor's Dance. They broke through the front line, massacred the Black Wind, but were massacred themselves in return. And what we've been left with is a horrific gap in our defences, a slightly larger Senate budget, which is a positive because we're not paying for those two armies, and a bunch of zombies, including the former Iron
Yeah.
Helms, who have now arisen from the dead and are wandering around Thorunin in the dark, which is scary. If you imagine Thorunin as like a typical like southern USA swamp kind of vibe with hillbillies and everything, and then put undead boyar husks wandering around with knives, axes, and great axes, then it's becoming a scarier place by the day. Let alone the Druge that are there, and let alone the Valorn that are there as well. It's probably not a holiday destination at this point.
No, you do not want to take your kids there.
No. Yeah. Is there anything I've missed there? Still a long
What I think the
explanation, but
beauty.
long, long
I
wind
mean,
this
it's
was.
a long wind and it's a really like well written wind, well written wind. Go on, say that 7 times.
Yeah.
Um, because it's so up and down with the sort of emotional points of it. So like at one point you're like the knights are glorious, they're really roaring with glory, and then it's like, oh, they're all dead. And it's like, oh, they're roaring with glory again, they're all dead. Um, and the Iron Helms bit comes close to the end, so I sort of, as I was reading it, was like, oh, maybe we've got off a little bit scot-free, and then it's like, no, as they begin to rise, they're all husks, and you're like, ah, damn. But
Fuck.
yeah, so really well written. Fuck.
Danica was there, right?
Yeah. So basically, if for people who are new players, when you go into downtime, which is the sort of time where you're not in game, you can choose what your character does and how they make money. So for me, it's a military unit. So the first event, I just did something small, well, not small, but like a little bit not close to plot. So it was like go and protect a veil for us from some wolves. I was like, that sounds cool, generates money, I'll go do that. And then the second time, because I'd, been adjutant for Older Eye, I felt a bit more closer to that vein. And also we had the Gurden, so a bit maybe some money, but um so I decided to go with it and it has backfired horrifically. So yeah, Danica is not in a good spot. She is, yeah. I don't know what's going to happen. I haven't decided yet what route I'm going to go, but there's obviously the choice to come in terminal, which means your character is basically goner, or we're going to be given some sort of traumatic wound. And I've got a couple of ideas about what that might be, but I've never received one, so that'll be really fun to play out.
Maybe like a severed eyeball or something. Have it dangling
Oh
from
yeah,
dangling from
I
below
I
an eye
just
patch.
I have this horrible vision that when time in begins, Verushka is going to be a hellscape. That there's just going to be a lot of loss and um yeah, maybe a couple of husk appearances. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's the thing is these lingering again from the winds themselves. Um, any general of one of the armies in Thurunin, or anyone who fought alongside that army with their warband, so Danica in this case, has received a lingering wound. This will be included in your pack and either represents a serious injury sustained in battle or the consequence of fighting under Rivers Run Red, which is another sort of large scale ritual that I think it doubles the amount of casualties that are taken in a war zone on both sides.
Probably.
So it's fucked. Like if you get a scratch from a nail under this spell, it will get infected, and then like you might lose the hand or the whole limb, for an example. And even though in Anvil, we've often got physics, you've got herbs where we can restore these limbs. We are the cream of the Empire. We've got access to this,
Mhm.
and soldiers in the Imperial Army do not. So when they go on
Yeah.
campaign and they get scratched whilst under the effects of Rivers Run Red, they can lose limbs. They can even die. It's an absolutely horrendous ritual, and you've been right in the heart of it, haven't you?
In the heart of it. But on the plus side, we get a nice sexy aura. So whatever that will manifest, I really hope it's something nice and not another sort of blow. Um, but yeah, on the plus side, auras, woo!
Woo!
Um,
And potentially
woo!
huskification, as you said.
Potentially huskification, yeah.
Do you think there's a chance for 28 days later to play out inside Anvil? Or maybe 28 weeks later, in
Absolutely.
that basement when they all start to turn?
Oh no. I just have visions of like the gambling tent burning down. And yeah, it's not pretty. Really not pretty. But it'll be really interesting because obviously there'll be people in Navarre who will be, facing the exact same effect. So it'll be interesting. I think it's going to generate a lot of Navarre Varushka crossover. And I think Dawn had an army there as well, right?
There was Blackthorns, Sailor's Dance, Iron Helms, and the Tower Jacks were not there. They'd just finished building a fortification. General to Golden Sun. Yeah. Glorious Knights to Golden Sun. We continue our grinding advance through Thurunin. Yeah,
Yeah,
Dawn.
lot of sort of intonation play there, which will be nice. Um, it's really devastating that we've lost entire armies. I didn't even know that was something possible that orcs could do. I mean, obviously they can, but it never occurred to me that we could be losing that many people. And I think what made it for me was the way that we found out this information, and it was being in a car with a lot of sort of um, people who were really invested in this game on the way to the Alps, where we were about to all lose signal, and sort of just trying to read it as quickly as possible, trying to figure out the consequences. And it's already generated, so many potential interactions. But I think being actively involved in something as a new player is when you start going, holy shit, okay, this is how I can get involved next season. This is what I can start getting up to. So it's made me really excited for the next event.
What do you think is going to happen in the politics of the MC tent now that there's two less generals, the
Ooh,
Druze are on the assault? What do you think happens next?
I cannot wait to be in that military council tent. for the first sort of hour of Empire because I think it's going to be some of the best role play that that game has ever seen. Obviously, I'm a very new player, but I think there's been so many high stakes, from the Raven and Dawn to this absolute clusterfuck. Um, it's yeah, I think the Empress will be under a lot of pressure. I think all the generals will be sweating. There'll be a lot of I think maybe grief will bring everyone together. Is my hope is that we've got all of these conflicts happening, but we've just had these heavy losses. I mean, maybe that's less interesting for game, but for the sense of the Empire continuing, maybe it's what has to happen. But this is Empire, so we don't know. We
Very-
don't know, and it'll probably go the other way. Someone will flip the table, and I can't wait to watch it.
Yeah, Matt P has stated before that Empire is not a dystopian universe. I'm
Yep.
yet to see evidence. I would Matt P, please, please prove this is not a dystopia. Um, hot take from my side this time because you had your hot take about Navarre in the
Hmm.
previous episode. Um, are the Raven to blame for the loss of the Iron Helms and the Sailor's Dance? And here's why I'd argue yes. We've seen, I think, 15 military units support the Griffin's Pride, and I think about 30 or 40, like significant numbers, actually support the Raven and help them escape from that assault. Now, if you look at that, that's 55 total military units. And let's say the ones with the Griffin's Pride were going anyway because it's Dornish roleplay, whatever. The 40 of them who are left over, that is 4,000 troops that could have been elsewhere in the Empire. Do you think those 4,000 troops would have prevented this kind of clusterfuck in Thurunan?
I was going to sort of retort with two questions, and the first being, is it the Raven's fault or is it the Griffin's pride for choosing that exact moment to go in and act, their fury? And um, I think by the Griffin's pride declaring they were doing it this event, or like last event, sorry, it's put all of the Imperial armies who went and who were in Thurunan a little bit on the back foot. But in terms of what was my other point?
Question number
From
two.
Question number two. Why is it always two that gets me on this thing? I can never get
It's a
past
big
number
number.
one.
Two is a huge
It's a
number.
huge number.
Yeah.
They never taught us it, so
It looks like a
um
swan. It's aggressive and scary.
it's like a swan or maybe a goose. A
Yeah.
really horrible
I like
goose.
to think
They're
seven's
scary.
more like a goose. It's like reared up at that point.
Interesting. I there's a cool thing about associating colors with numbers. I've always thought the blue is seven. But anyway, back to the slaughter. Um I would the extra troops have helped us? I don't know. Because the Druze that we've sort of read about with this wind have seemed really um, tough, really, really sort of hard to kill and to leave down. And even if we had reinforcements, I do think that maybe they still would have continued their sort of onslaught, and maybe we would have just suffered higher casualties. From an icy point, I'm a little bit annoyed at the other armies of the Empire for sort of letting their fellow armies go through that alone. But I don't know enough about the Raven's history at the minute to say if it is them, if that makes sense. I'm still doing my research as a new player. Um, but I think, them being in Imperial territory, it is a what's the word? It's something that naturally people would have gone to maybe fight anyway, and maybe
Yeah.
we would have always had this conclusion. So,
Yeah, they're
it could have
sat
been a
on a. Sorry to interrupt you, but they're sat on a
no, no, go
mithril
for it.
line, and like
Exactly,
the
yeah.
Barrens is one territory like Ossium or Thurunan, but it's geographically massive, so I think there's a lot more regions within it, and each of those
Yeah.
regions had an orc tribe, and when the Barrens belonged to the Druge, that those tribes were subservient to the Druge, and the Druge treated them pretty shit. But then also when the Imperials have come in, we've not had a good track record of treating well with those tribes either. And I think the Iron Helms exterminated some, like the Black Wind, which is why the
Yes, yeah.
survivors then went and joined the Druge and have now been seen as a campaign army inside Thurunan. So I agree with you that at some point, the Empire needs to raise armies. It needs that. It wants that mithril for the financial gains alone, right? From the poor seats to fix the Senate budget. Navarre needs that mithril, or at least access to buying that mithril to build those four armies that they want to create to destroy the Forlorn. So it was. I think you're right that it was always going to happen, but the timing of the Griffin's Pride going in and sucking loads of MUs away means we haven't hit the Druge back as hard as we'd liked. Because I correct
No, I mean,
someone correct me if I'm
I'm
wrong in the
sorry, just to
comments. Oh
quickly,
yeah, go for it.
sorry, just to quickly interject there as well. But do you think that the resources we would have gained are now not a gain? They're just to replace things that we've now lost. Like I can't see replacing all the armies we lost being a cheap endeavor. So do you think that mithril mine is just gonna go straight back into replacing armies?
Yeah. Bluntly, yes,
It's
absolutely.
just a shame.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
mithril
it
white
just feels
granite.
very pointless at this point.
Yeah, we've done it now, so we have to sort of
Yeah.
piss our bed and sleep in it because that's definitely a saying. But there's three strategic resources: mithril, white granite, and weirwood. White granite is for like fortifications. Weirwood is for like more like admin style buildings, if I remember. And then
Yeah.
mithril is used to create campaign armies. All of these things can be used in different contexts, but those are like the very broad strokes of what they're meant to do. So yeah, we've lost two armies.
We got a
Y-
nice pointy rock.
We got a pointy rock. It'll give us 20, I think like 20 or 30. That's usually the right amount, 20 to 30 wains per
Yeah.
season. So that is going to be 80 in a year. 8, 16, 24. And we need 200 per army. So that is going to be, oh dear, yeah, it's going to be 6 years until that mine
Yeah,
produces enough mithril
actually sort of pays back.
to get us an army back. Sorry, to get us two
Oh
armies back.
dear.
Oh dear.
Yeah, it's really harsh. And considering there were sort of plans in place to get more armies anyway, I don't know what's going to be paused and what's going to be pulled forward, but it's really interesting. Do you know any more about sort of what how do I say it? Like not the government of Anvil because that's probably the wrong terminology, but how the sort of officials' feeling towards the Raven was, and sort of if they had any deals in play that have now sort of suffered as a result of what's going on. And do you think that is also going to leave us in a bit of a perilous situation?
Yeah, so I can give you both the IC and OC broad strokes.
Okay.
And dear listeners, please refer back to the start of the episode with our disclaimer. So OC, what's this has caused a lot of a lot of fuss because PD are trying to balance out game, sort of like access to plot for people, right? There's up to I've heard numbers of up to 100 people involved. How deeply they're involved is maybe it's 10 people who are really talking to the Raven and doing something major. The other 90 are doing supporting roles. But I've heard up to 100 people are in the process of getting a deal with the Raven.
Wow.
Access to the mine or relocating them or even just trying to turn them from a neutral faction into an allied one.
Gosh, I bet they're furious. I
Exactly.
bet they're
So
so furious.
exactly. You've hit the nail on the head there because one player, the General of Griffin's Pride, has been able to put the torch to that roleplay for those 100 people. Now you could argue that this game is all about profound decisions and player versus player, political roleplay. It's like the first line of the game setting, and that this is, and I agree with the statement. It's in the spirit of the game to have done so. But on an
Absolutely.
OC level, I do understand why PD have allowed this unique response to a military action by allowing players to go and defend what are fundamentally they're legally defined as foreigners, so a neutral
Hmm.
faction, but they were most likely to become our enemies. They've been
Yeah.
subservient to the Druge before. We wanted them to be subservient to us. They resisted in both cases. We're dealing with a truly neutral faction, and the general's gone in and wiped them out, which is a very Dornish thing to do because Dorne believes the barons belongs to them. It's their
Yeah.
ancestral homelands. That's what they believe. The orcs, of course, will differ, and that's why they were not moving.
Mm.
So that
From
so
what I
sorry, go on.
go on. Okay. Um, Also, I guess my understanding is, we are an imperialistic force, so it's just sort of in the nature of our brief as well to go, these people aren't sort of adhering to our standards, so let's remove them.
Yeah.
For me, their actions have been completely in game and completely like justified by the system. But I think if I'd put in, 80 hours of a weekend to getting this deal, of course I'd be bummed. But I think that happens in everyday politics now. We see people putting in like years and then it just getting railroaded by whoever's in charge of something. So it's quite realistic, actually.
Yeah, we see the efforts of Macron and Starmer only to watch Trump shit all over Zelensky. Yeah, it
Yeah,
feels like a very
exactly.
apt parable, our current Raven issue, doesn't it? So,
Mm.
yeah, we are a empire. We are not the
Yeah,
goodies, and we are a theocratic empire. So we have one religion, and the punishment for heresy is death. So if you do not believe in our religion, we will kill you. That is how we behave. That's our law. If you look at the actual imperial legal law on the wiki, then you will be shocked by what you read because it is not like modern UK law with a little medieval
no,
twist. It is imperial law. It is short, brutal, and deeply uh, corruptible. Maybe not the right word, but twistable. Hearsay is admissible in court.
very subjective.
Thank you. That's the right word, subjective. So, from a legal standpoint, uh, sorry, from a theme of the game, from an imperial standpoint, I agree that General of the Griffin's Pride has done what a Dornish general would do. The magistrates, though, so this is now straying into the IC split. The OC one is broadly summarised by lots of people wanted to be friends with them. One person's ended that arc. Like you said, 100 people are kind of bummed, so they've given those 100 people a chance to kind of fight back, which is the
Do you
resistance
know
option.
how many people supported Griffin's Pride? Like it was what,
I think it's 15, if I
four?
remember
Just
correctly.
15, 40, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
15.
there's clearly other players in the game who feel similarly to them. So I don't think that general is alone in their actions.
Yeah, absolutely. For the IC side of things, Dawn wants the barons, and this is a step forwards. The Empire needs those mines, and this is a step forwards. The Ravin, whilst foreigners, and it was an imperial crime to attack them as foreigners. They weren't barbarians; they were foreigners. Um, we've got to follow due process. We've got to follow our own laws and punish the general. But like you just said, I think there'll be some people in Anvil who are glad this has happened because it was, it's a mind that the Empire wants. It was going to get it one way or another. But then on the flip side, there's lots of people in Anvil who will not be happy with this. And I think even more now, based on the consequences in Therunin, right?
Yeah,
Where there's
absolutely.
40 players who have directly supported the Ravin with military units. They're not traitors to the Empire under Imperial law, but I can easily see other characters on the field seeing those defenders of the Ravin as traitors, because
Mm.
it even says it on the Wind of War. If your unit went in, you have killed Imperial soldiers, and in any other scenario, that would be a crime with the punishment of death. So how, especially how Dornish characters are going to react to that, I think is going to be really interesting. And what you
Yeah,
said for
really
that
spicy.
first hour in the MC tent, I think that's going to stand aside as you potentially, if you might see a general get lynched.
Yeah, yeah. I'd be really, really surprised to see them come to the weekend and not get any flack. Um, but then I think what's great is that this is not just going to stop in the military tent. That like that's obviously where the sort of beating heart of this issue is going to be played out. But it just within little sects, people who've come away from the battle who have traumatic wounds or lingering wounds, or people who know their friends who supported. Like it gives so many mini groups of players the time and the sort of conversation starters for when they arrive back, which is really interesting. And I think we'll see a lot of um, sort of nation versus nation play on a bigger scale, which will be nice because I haven't really seen a lot of that yet.
Definitely, and I think link for Varushka and Navarre is going to be strained. And to go back to my hot take, the
Yeah.
do we blame the Ravin? It's a bit of a bait question, and you were right to question me. Well, actually, don't we blame the general of the Griffin's Pride? And we do. Yes, we do. But and also, even if those military units hadn't been committed to the Ravin and all of them had been in Tarunin, I correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I believe that military units attached to an army, they don't increase the amount of they increase its attacking power, but not its ability to take damage. So those military units will be able to kill the Druge and deplete their armies, but because our military units are not part of the Iron Helms, for example, we're mercenaries, we're separate units. The Iron Helms will take the brunt of the casualties in the lore, and the mechanically that means that RMUs stay at full health, but in return the Iron Helms will take all of the casualties that the Druge would have done to our military units. So the Iron Helms and the
Didn't know
Sailor's
that.
Dance were dead the second that this Druge force crossed the border. But what could have changed is if we had an extra 4,000 military strength from those units in defending the Ravin, is that we might have killed a Druge army in return. We might have given them a bloody nose. But what it looks like is that they've taken casualties for sure, but we haven't seen any of their armies disband. They don't look particularly tired, and they look ready for round two. And round two is only going to be against two Imperial armies in the territory, not four this time. And we're going to have to rush other armies to come and defend Tharunin, and it's going to be bloody.
I actually haven't properly studied the map because I know that I think I'm right in saying that the armies can only move sort of three territories
Yep.
or up to three territories per. So it'll be interesting to see who can actually get to Thurunin as well, um, and what the generals want to do about Thurunin because I don't know how how the sort of ties will be in that tent now that a couple of them have sort of gone off and done one thing and some have done the other, and it'll be interesting to see people try and repair those relationships. And I think people who sort of run military council and have to sort of delegate within are going to have such a task next season. Um, but then I think there'll also be a respect for certain nations as well because um, like Varushka did go and help Navarre, and we have been sort of fighting in their corner, and in return, we didn't get the support back. So I think there'll be some respect from the Varushkans, from Navarre to Varushka, but I don't think it's going to be reciprocated. I think it'll be really sort of tense there, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think I've seen something similar echoed in one of the discords, either the Navarre or the Farishkan ones. Was essentially that the um I think it was a decent chunk of Navari military units. And to be fair, there were some Farushkans in there defending Aravan.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, exactly.
but I think a lot of them were Navari. And the theme that's playing out is that Navarre were too busy getting involved in Dornish politics that they lost some more of their own home territory in return.
What do you think was the driving factor for Navarre to go to? Do you think it was just anger at the Ravin that probably drove them?
Yeah, individual players,
Yeah.
you could argue that any law-abiding citizen would have felt compelled to to
Mm.
uh, go to defend the Ravin because the Griffin's Pride were committing a crime and they were trying to prevent that crime. That's a very virtuous thing to do.
Yeah. I think that's kind of the thing that I was juggling with is now that I like Danica's been a part of this army, she's got a big I Heart Iron Helms tattoo on her back. And she's I think I was probably all for the Empress's declaration and supporting the Ravin, but this has turned it on its head a little bit where I'm like, okay, was it worth all of the fight that we went through? Um, and I'm still deciding where I stand a little bit on that. I'm really angry at the people who left the armies to fend for themselves, but I also understand the reason for people going and defending and stuff. So I'm still a little undecided, but regardless, it'll be really interesting roleplay whatever side of the fence you fall on.
Yeah, I think the Griffin's Pride took 750 casualties out of like 4,000 or so. So it's given it it's taken a good battering. in its campaign this season, it might have to resupply, or it might have to step straight into Thurunin, where it too is at risk of taking so much damage it disbands, right? So
Yeah.
we've left ourselves in a shit position with three armies. You could argue totally unnecessary losses. We could have taken that mine at any point,
Yeah.
and now the Druge can cut into the Barrens from Thurunin, from the Forest of Ornak, and also from their home territories as well.
Yeah.
There's a if you go into the for anyone listening at home who's in the Varushkan Discord, if you go to the Winds of War channel and click on the Under Eastern Skies one and scroll up, there is a map someone has made. I won't say their name in case it's private, but someone's made this really, really good up-to-date military map of what's happening in the Empire, which faction controls which territory, and where the actual armies are, at least as of the end of E4. So in Redoubt, which is a Urizeni province that's sort of just southwest of Thurunin, there's three armies there that have just seen off a large Grendel invasion. So that's been good news for the Empire this season as the Grendel tried to land in Redoubt. They did not make it. They got crumped. And also the Children of Rex got crumped as well, which is nice to see. Those armies are within three spaces of Thurunin, so they could pile in. I think there's an Orc army in Mariv. I have no idea why we're still holding on to Mariv when we've got so many shitstorms going on at home, but I'm not a general, don't ask me. So they could pile in. We've also got the Golden Axe, I think, in Zenith itself, so just to the south. And then, of course, the Griffin's Pride in the Barrens to the north. So we could put in another six armies into Thurunin.
Easy.
But that would mean abandoning a front with the Grendel and leaving the Barons totally defenseless.
Very, very vulnerable. I think also though that these actions in Therunian have left Verushka really, sort of on edge because Ossium is so close by. If
Yeah,
I'm right, if I'm so who knows what could happen to Verushka in the next couple of seasons. That's, if, these areas aren't secured, it'll be interesting.
yeah, that's our home. That's Ossium. That's where the Pine Wheels live.
That's our home.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh
we're right.
no.
I think what's our law? We're sort of near the border with the Forest of Ulnak, so we are going to be
Yeah.
the first ones to get absolutely crumped where the Druge come in.
Railroaded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's our Sterling amateur. Well, actually, no, not amateur. You've been in the tent. My Sterling amateur assessment of just how bad this clusterfuck is. In good news, Grendel's good news, but also in the Mournwold, we've beaten back the Jotun, I believe. They put a huge invasion in there, and we've met it with 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 11. 11 Imperial armies with some others
Worthy win.
in nearby territories to beat the
I,
shit
w-
out of them.
I was going to ask you this about sort of Jotun law. I don't know if this is helpful for anyone listening, but it's probably going to be helpful for me. But I think somewhere I read that the Jotun sort of respect friendly, even fight, or like at least not friendly fighting. I don't think that's a thing, but they respect the rules of war. To be fair, so like if we weren't strong, they maybe wouldn't want to fight us. And do you think they're now going to want to fight us, even though like because we're so on the ground with armies?
Yeah,
Do you
so
think it's worth us going there?
no,
I mean,
so
it obviously is, but
no, sorry, go on.
I mean, it's worth us holding our borders and stuff, but do you think it's worth us putting in an effort when we're obviously fighting much stronger battles?
Yeah, so this is the eternal balancing act of the military council because up until right now, the Druze have had a whole year of not having their teeth kicked in too hard because we pushed them out of Ossium, we pushed them out of Thurunin, and we started to look at the of Soundgrave. We had a huge campaign to push them out of the Barrens. They only own three territories now. You know, they're the same size as Urizen. However, because of the pressure from the Jotun and the big Grendel Sea invasion as well, you know, we lost half of the Brass Coast. We've had to let them.
Oh,
We've just had to leave them be because they weren't attacking us, so we didn't attack them.
yeah.
When it comes to the
God,
Jotun, they have this. They're definitely the goodies of the setting. They've got this idea for honorable warfare, and they like to fight a big, strong opponent who can give them a good fight. Because if they die in battle, they get to jump the howling abyss and go to the afterlife. So it's a win-win for them. If we're so weak and we just surrender land to them, you're right. They might stop. They probably would. But then at that point, the marchers will have a fit because they've lost their land, and maybe some parts of the Brass Coast as well. If we try and hit them, they'll just get a war boner and hit us back harder. So we'll just get stuck
With
in a
their war
forever war.
boner.
Yeah, we've been fighting the Odin for literally since I started playing 10 years ago, and it's the same old shit. They line up heavy armored troops, and then we grind each other down, rinse and repeat in the Affithid or in the Monwold or in Bragisland. So yeah, it was cool the first 6 times. Now we're on 10. It's getting a little bit boring,
Flavor.
but
Mm.
with their combat doctrine and their leadership, again, you're right. We're going to be stuck in a forever war with them unless either we kill them entirely or we let them stamp all over us until they get bored of us. Neither of which are good decisions.
I mean, I sure hope our relationships with the Thule are strong because I don't think we can take a beating from the north either at this point.
God, if they
So,
go for us, we're in so much trouble.
yeah, Vrooska is like a squashed sandwich in a bag. Um,
We're in a murder
but
sandwich between a Druze and a Thiel. Yeah.
sandwich. I just quickly, I don't think I touched on earlier, linking it back to, why we started this podcast
Oh
being,
yeah.
military council. I didn't realize how much of like a numbers game it would be as well. There was a certain part where when you are working out conjunctions, I'd never known how it was formulated, and if I'm correct, then basically you get given the numbers of four sizes, and they've got to make a certain number to go into the Sentinel Gate. And everyone, all the generals turn to their adjutants and sort of get them to do the maths. And the Empress is sat there like some sort of Carol Vorderman on Countdown while everyone's like scrambling to do their sort of maths. And I didn't realize that was how conjunctions were sort of sorted. So that was something I forgot to mention earlier, but you just reminded me. So
Oh yeah, the
yes,
big so major conjunctions like the battles.
yes, yeah, yeah. I think that's what they call it. I could be getting my terms wrong.
Yeah, I think no, I
Uh,
think you've called it. You've used the right terminology, but e- everyone calls them conjunctions. I think they're meant to be major conjunctions, and then there's regular conjunctions,
ah,
rather than major and
I
minor to make it
see.
clear. But clear as mud as usual. Yeah, they decide the force weightings and which nation works together for which battle opportunity on the Saturday or Sunday.
Yeah, which I didn't know. So it was a cool little bit to find out. And yeah, I think everyone sort of just looked at each other, hoping some sort of Cambridge grad is in the tent, and they'll just get it. So it takes ages while people are trying to do it. And we just ended up eating like strawberry laces and letting, I think it was the marchers work it out. So that was fun.
Just there's the leadership of the Iron Helms, and you're sat there sucking down the strawberry lace like Lady in the Tramp, and you're like, what? Yeah, overwhelming
You would be
assault into Sark, please.
you'd be surprised how many sort of backstage sweet deals are going on. You'll have someone sort of offering you two jelly worms for a bite of a carrot cake, and you're like, you know what? Sure, we're all friends here.
Okay,
Um,
that's possibly the most interesting thing I've ever heard about MC. This,
really,
yeah, the candy trading. Candy?
candy
Oh
trading,
gosh,
yeah,
that's
back.
Americanized. Sweet trading. Sweet trading. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, the Griffin's Pride captain or general will not be getting any sweets next. He's been left out of the gang.
Uh,
Um,
yeah, I guess actually on the topic of next events, I think my closing question, again a nice broad one, is obviously the Iron Helms have been disbanded. What's left of them? There's a big question mark over what that is going to look like. But do you think you would pursue a career in the tent now? Would you maybe try and stand to be leader of one of the other Varushkan armies?
I really really love the MC game, and the idea of being a general, is something that both me and Danica would like to try out. And the only thing that's maybe put me off adjutanting, I don't know what the verb is, but that role is kind of just how much it took away from what I love, which is the skirmishes. And so I think maybe a bit more of a natural progression would be to go into something like the battle, like on field command first, and then go for general. But then I think as a new player, like that's something as well to maybe round us off is how you get new players into those positions on field. Because from my time in military council, it did seem like a lot of people just step up from their seats or are picked from the pool of generals, and I think that's something they're trying to change. But maybe going on field, doing a bit of that command, and sort of making connections with the people who would be my voting base or the people who I'd listen to for advice and getting to know them a bit more. And it's clear I'm not as well versed in the game, but maybe the only way to get well versed is to throw yourself in. So I'm still undecided, but
Absolutely.
eventually it is something that I would like to pursue.
Yeah, zombie Danica's got to get stuck in. The
Yeah. I mean,
oh no, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, I mean, I'm really excited that Varushka's got some plot because for my first two events we were quite thin on the ground with like what skirmishes we could go on or like what we were up to. It seemed like we were a bit of an afterthought in some of the wins. So for this to be so big for our game and to maybe have a battle that involves like dead Iron Helms or zombie Iron Helms is really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Zombie Iron Helms running up to them and going, "Oh, Beatir, no, what have they done to my boy?"
Does it?
You might know some of them.
Uh, yeah, that really that I think that'll be a really hard like emotional battle because what I really would hate to see is like we walk onto the field and like there's just a husk Alderaan the Fair stood with their axe in hand and
Oh
just
God.
going, "Oh no, we are all dead." Um, and like imagine like just there just being like zombie hounds and stuff like that's pretty cool. So I think they'll have really high hit points and will be tough to take down.
Yeah, they're in the sort of fluff around the description of what happened to the Iron Helms. It talked about the soldiers getting up from the dead, but also of darker, bigger creatures hiding in the trees.
Yeah,
So
I think
be
it'll be
cool
a
to see some of
real cool
those.
battle.
Yeah. But to actually answer your question, your final question, um, there's a field marshal in every major conjunction that is chosen by the military council. So I think that's what you've seen. Then
Hmm.
the generals may or may not have a role on the battlefield. Quite often they do, but it's not a requirement. PD stressed out you don't have to be a physically fighty character to be a general. But then the people who actually lead on the battlefield, I guess you could call them sergeants or captains, who are
Yeah.
players who will lead that front line. They might have between 20 to 30 people under their command or in their aura, if you will, and they'll be responsible for actually carrying out the intent of the field marshal. So, Dubravka is our one, for example, our strategos, but also a
Yeah.
captain. You'll follow them around and beat the shit out of some orcs on their orders, and that would be your captain.
It's really
But
cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
and like you said, the
But I
people
think
you fight with are your vote base because they. I don't know how it exactly it works in Varushka. I think it's either wise ones elect you, but often people with military units are allowed to vote for their favourite candidate to then be vetted by the wise ones. So if
Mhm.
you've proven yourself as a popular leader amongst them, then yeah, it's probably a good move to make a claim for a general's position.
Yeah, and I don't understand how sorry, I don't know how it's going to work now that we technically I think only have like one army and one on loan from Navarre. Um but maybe on loan is way too generous. No, we took it. It's ours. Um so yeah, so it'll be really interesting to see what happens with those. I imagine as well there'll be generals who, haven't quite finished their go and at the game, so might want to run again, and it'll be really interesting to see who puts themselves forward. But I think maybe a couple more spins around about a couple more promenades for Danica before she goes for the big title. But it's definitely something that's going to happen at some point whenever I, stop being a coward. Just do it.
Or a zombie.
Or a zombie general. That's pretty cool. Well, I don't
Zombie
know.
general.
Yeah,
Is that the title of today's episode?
zombie general. Yeah, that's the USP.
Fantastic. Well, on that bombshell, I think that brings us to the end of today's episode. So thank you once again, Amber,
Ghoulish
for joining me.
goodbye. No worries.
Yeah. Zombie General? Question mark. We'll
Hmm.
find out at
Ghoulish
E1, I guess.
goodbye, I think is a
Ghoulish
yeah. Oh,
goodbye.
maybe we'll
Oh,
see.
ghoulish
Ghoulish
goodbye.
goodbye.
Yeah,
There's
that's better.
that's the title.
Fantastic. All
Yeah,
right then.
it was good chatting. Bye bye bye.
Bye bye bye.